On my wedding day, my fiancé ran away with my best friend, Arthur Cartwright. I became the laughingstock of London's high society, utterly humiliated. It was then that Winifred Ainsworth, known as the Ice Queen of our social circle, confessed her feelings for me. Slowly, we grew closer and began a relationship. For 5 years, she was gentle and caring towards me. I thought she would be my companion for life. Until a week before our wedding, I discovered her heartfelt declaration to Arthur. "I'm getting married. As long as you can be happy, I'm willing to marry someone I don't love." It turns out, the wedding dress she had meticulously prepared was embroidered with lilies, Arthur's favorite flowers. The ring she personally designed featured a sapphire, Arthur's preferred gemstone. Every detail she planned for our wedding was tinged with regret for not marrying her true love. For 5 years, what I thought was my redemption was merely her elaborate lie to pave the way for her beloved. Ding! Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. I sat at the computer watching the video on the screenplay over and over again. I'd forgotten my laptop at the office and had to use Winifred's computer to handle some work emails. But I accidentally stumbled upon a video she had recorded. A confession of love to Arthur. She was wearing a pristine white wedding dress, smiling and laughing with tears glistening in her eyes. "Do I look beautiful in this wedding dress? I wanted you to be the first to see it," she said, her eyes crinkling with a smile, brimming with undisguised affection. We'd been together for 5 years, and those eyes had smiled at me countless times. But I'd never seen her smile like this before, so tender, so full of unspoken feelings. "Arthur, I'm getting married. As long as you can be happy, I'm willing to marry someone I don't love. Love isn't about receiving, it's about giving. I'll keep giving to you silently, forever." I mechanically turned off the computer, the dark screen reflecting my lifeless expression. Memories of the past played back in my mind. 3 years ago, I was in love with my girlfriend, Mavis. On our wedding day, she suddenly eloped with my best friend, Arthur. That brideless wedding became the talk of London's social circles. I shut myself away at home, drowning my sorrows in alcohol day and night. A few days later, Winifred broke down my door, confessing she had always had feelings for me and begged me not to give up on myself. Now I realize, she just wanted to prevent me from doing anything rash, so Arthur and Mavis could be together without worry. Our 5-year relationship was just to keep me stable and eliminate any chance of Mavis coming back to me. She was willing to sacrifice her own marriage to ensure Arthur's happiness. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Oh, Winifred, your love is truly grand." There was a noise at the door, and the living room light came on. Seeing me sitting on the sofa, Winifred paused for a moment before smiling and coming to sit beside me. "Were you waiting for me?" "I'm sorry. Meredith and the girls insisted I join their hen party," she said, wrapping her arm around mine and burying her head in my shoulder. "They made me drink quite a bit. Ewan, I feel awful." I gently pushed her away. "I'll make you some honey water. Why don't you go take a shower first?" She nuzzled my shoulder. "All right, whatever you say, darling." Watching her walk to the bathroom with a light step, I smiled bitterly. That darling. She should save it for someone else. Her phone, left on the coffee table, buzzed with a message. I glanced at it instinctively and saw a familiar profile picture. It was the avatar Arthur had used for years, saved under the name My Love. "Winifred, Mavis doesn't love me anymore. You're all I have left." It felt like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over me. I went cold all over. The phone kept buzzing, message after message flooding the screen. I hurriedly stood up, fleeing to the kitchen as if to escape. When Winifred came out, I was still standing in the kitchen, staring blankly at the honey jar. She picked up her phone and called to me through the glass kitchen door. "Ewan, where's the honey water?" The next second, she saw the messages on her phone and her face fell. She hastily threw on her coat, her usually graceful movements so rushed she didn't even notice she'd buttoned it wrong. Grabbing her bag as she rushed to the door, she seemed to suddenly remember I was still making her honey water. She turned back to explain, "Meredith got caught drink driving on her way home. I need to go sort it out." Don't wait up for me. Just go to bed. Before I could answer, she was gone. The door slammed shut, leaving the flat in deathly silence. I quietly put down the glass and sent a message to my uncle in America. Uncle, I'm calling off the wedding. I'll be back at the American office next week. Winifred hadn't returned all night, and I only saw her at the office the next afternoon. She was still wearing the coat from last night, her usually immaculate face showing signs of fatigue, but her mood seemed good. She was chatting cheerfully with someone across from her, but when she looked up and saw me, her expression suddenly became flustered. I had a sinking feeling, and sure enough, as the figure facing away from me turned around, it was Arthur Cartwright, whom I hadn't seen in years. He looked just as I remembered, flashing me a casual smile. "Ewan, long time no see," I replied coldly. "The last time we met was at my wedding. This time, have you come back a few days early?" An awkward expression crossed Arthur's face. Seeing this, Winifred stood up and said in an annoyed tone, "Ewan, what kind of talk is that? Why bring up something from so many years ago?" She was about to lose her temper when Arthur quickly intervened. "Winifred, don't blame Ewan. What happened back then? I was in the wrong." He turned to me and said in an apologetic tone, "Ewan, I've always regretted it. I shouldn't have done something so rash and hurt you. But matters of the heart are truly difficult to resolve perfectly. Now, Mavis and I aren't happy either, so I suppose we've paid the price. Fortunately, you've found your own happiness, which makes me feel a bit better. Congratulations to you and Winifred." Looking at his insincere smile, I didn't want to say another word and turned to go to my own office. The company was founded by Winifred. Back then, she refused her parents' arrangements and chose to start her own business, which was extremely challenging. I admired her greatly and felt for her struggles. I had turned down my uncle's invitation, quit my high-paying job, and joined Winifred's company to help her with business development. Over the years, I had worked tirelessly to bring in business and negotiate investments, putting everything into realizing her dream. Now it seemed I had only moved myself. I was organizing the project files on hand, planning to hand them over properly before returning to America. Alwyn rushed in with some documents. "Ewan, why have you withdrawn from this project? You've been working on it for half a year, and it's about to be signed." I was stunned. Did Winifred know I was leaving? Alwyn handed me the documents, utterly confused. "Who's this Arthur Cartwright? He suddenly parachuted in as the project manager? What about you?" I forced a smile. "The company probably has other plans. Let's wait for the notice." After Alwyn left, Arthur pushed open the door. He sat down across from me leisurely, his tone light and smug. "Ewan Quarrington, I didn't actively take this from you. It was Winifred's idea. She said I'm more suitable for this position." He then stood up and came closer, whispering, "Guess what? Do you think when she said position, she might have meant the groom's position as well?" Looking at his malicious smile, blood rushed to my head, and I punched him in the face. Arthur fell to the ground, his arm knocking over the monitor on the desk. With a loud crash, the screen shattered. Winifred came running at the sound. Seeing Arthur lying among the debris, she immediately rushed in front of me and slapped me hard. "Why did you attack Arthur? You know his health is poor. Why did you hit him so hard?" Seeing her anxious and furious expression, my heart ached. Known as the Ice Queen in the industry, she was usually reserved and rarely lost her composure. I had never seen her so panicked and angry before. It turns out, only Arthur could stir such emotions in her. I threw the documents in front of her. She glanced at them, a flicker of guilt in her eyes, and her voice softened. "Regardless, you shouldn't have resorted to violence. I'll explain this to you later. I need to take Arthur to the hospital first, then I'll come back to talk to you." When Winifred Ainsworth returned from her lunch break, she seemed to have calmed down and regained her usual gentle composure. "Ewan, let's go out for a bite. There are some things I'd like to discuss with you properly," she said. I nodded silently. After 5 years, even if it was ending, we should have a proper talk and part on good terms. At the restaurant, She studied the menu intently, ordering all my favorite dishes. After the waiter left, she moved to sit beside me. Her soft hand caressed my face as she said with concern, "Did I hurt you?" "I'm sorry. I was too impulsive." Before I could push her away, she quickly kissed my cheek and whispered, "Kiss, kiss, darling. Don't be cross anymore, please." She explained the project situation in a gentle voice, saying the timeline was tight and she hadn't had a chance to discuss it with me. Mavis and Arthur are going through a divorce. He's quit his job and is in a bad state. The doctor says he's showing signs of depression. I just wanted to help him out, give him something to focus on. Once he's feeling better, he'll leave the company. We're about to get married, and you're still hung up on Mavis?" She pretended to be jealous, putting on a stern face. "What do you mean by that? Are you still thinking about her?" Winifred had beautiful eyes, with pupils as clear as autumn water. Now, those eyes were gazing at me with tender affection. But in my mind, I saw the smile on her face when she confessed her love to Arthur in the video. It was indeed different. She truly was an excellent actress. After a moment of silence, I spoke softly, "Winifred, I'm going to America in a few days." Before I could finish my sentence, her phone on the table suddenly rang. The screen displayed "My love" in large letters. Winifred quickly picked up the phone, her eyes darting away. "It's the hospital, I need to take this." She went outside to answer the call. When she returned shortly after, she said anxiously, "Ewan, something's happened with Arthur. He doesn't have any family or friends here. I need to go check on him." Before I could respond, she turned to leave. I called out to stop her. Winifred turned back, her tone impatient. "Haven't I explained everything clearly? Why are you still?" I interrupted her, pointing at the table. "You forgot your car keys." Winifred froze, a puzzled expression on her face. She picked up the car keys, her voice hesitant. "You're not angry?" I nodded slightly. "No, I'm not angry." She hesitated for a moment, then turned and left. My stomach was in knots, and I couldn't eat a thing. I decided to return to the office, where I submitted my resignation to HR and packed up my belongings before leaving. Back at my flat, I packed my suitcase when my uncle called. After hearing the whole story, he said cheerfully, "A good man never lacks for a wife. When you come to America, your uncle will set you up with a different girl every day." I knew he was joking, but it did lighten my mood considerably. As dinner time approached, my phone rang again. Winifred Ainsworth's voice came through, barely concealing her anger. "Ewan Quarrington, what on earth are you playing at? Suddenly resigning? This project is crucial for the company. Even if you're being capricious, you need to prioritize. Get back here and attend to the client immediately." I replied calmly, "I've resigned. Arthur Cartwright is now in charge of the project." Silence fell on the other end, as if the air had frozen. Moments later, the call was disconnected. I found a large cardboard box and continued clearing out my things. Over the past 5 years, we had given each other many gifts. The presents I gave to Winifred were each carefully chosen, unique expressions of my feelings. As for the things she gave me, I spent 2 full hours scrolling through all of Arthur's social media posts from this afternoon. Watches, cufflinks, mountain bikes, travel books. Every single item was something he had mentioned or shown off. Winifred hadn't missed a single one. She had tirelessly bought me everything Arthur liked, finding a secret satisfaction in seeing these things on me. And I, like a fool, had treasured her false affections. Now, the rubbish bin was the rightful place for these things. As I threw the items into the bin downstairs, my stomach pain suddenly intensified. A silver Mercedes sped up and screeched to a halt in front of me. Winifred flung open the car door, strode quickly to my side, and violently hurled her bag at me. It hit me right in the stomach where the pain was unbearable. My face instantly turned pale, and I doubled over in agony. "Ewan Quarrington, what's this all about?" "This project affects the company's performance for the second half of the year. Do you want everyone's hard work to go to waste? How can you be so petty? No wonder Mavis Church chose Arthur." I was gasping from the pain, but I managed a cold laugh. So why didn't you choose Arthur then? Don't you like him? Winifred was taken aback, her expression changing rapidly before finally settling on a look of panic. What nonsense are you talking about? Never mind. Stay at home and think about what you've done. I'm going to attend to the client. I watched the car disappear around the corner, tears of laughter in my eyes. For 5 years, I had developed a severe stomach ulcer from all the drinking I'd done to secure business for her. She used to be very concerned about my stomach condition, getting worried at the slightest discomfort. Now that Arthur was back, she didn't even notice me sweating in pain right in front of her. Indeed, the difference between love and indifference was stark. After taking the herbal medicine, I drifted off into a restless sleep. I'm not sure how long I slept, but I woke up in a cold sweat, my body aching all over. The room was pitch black. I glanced at my phone. It was nearly midnight, and Winifred still wasn't home. Fighting through the pain, I drove myself to the hospital. Just as I merged onto the motorway, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was a video from Arthur Cartwright. The video showed Winifred, her face flushed, sleeping peacefully. Her smooth shoulders bore faint red marks. My mind went blank, and the pain in my stomach intensified. Suddenly, a tremendous explosion erupted ahead. I instinctively slammed on the brakes. The car behind me couldn't stop in time and crashed into me hard. Meanwhile, Winifred's body jerked violently as she awoke with a start. She sat up, slightly panicked, then sighed with relief when she saw her clothes were still on properly. Arthur stood up from the sofa and poured her a glass of water. "You're awake. Are you feeling all right?" Winifred rubbed her forehead. "Did I get drunk?" The client was quite demanding. "You helped me fend off a lot of drinks, but ended up having too much yourself. You looked unwell, so I booked a room upstairs for you to rest." "Thank you, I'm fine now." Winifred checked her phone and hurriedly got up. "It's so late. I need to get home." Suddenly, her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar male voice. "Is this Ms. Winifred Ainsworth? Mr. Ewan Quarrington has been in a multi-vehicle collision on the motorway. Several cars exploded, and Mr. Quarrington's car was among them." Winifred felt her heart sink, her pupils dilating in shock. Despite Arthur's protests, she rushed to the accident site as quickly as possible. The motorway was already cordoned off, with police cars and ambulances coming and going constantly. Flames still raged on the bridge. The fire hadn't been extinguished yet. Winifred, overcome with fear, tried to push past the police tape onto the bridge but was firmly held back by officers. "Miss, please don't interfere with the rescue efforts. It's extremely dangerous over there. There could be more explosions at any moment." As rescue workers carried stretchers down from the bridge, Winifred frantically called out Ewan's name, checking each one. But he wasn't among them. After an agonizing wait, the fire was finally put out, and all the injured had been rescued. But there was still no sign of Ewan. A search and rescue worker approached her apologetically. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Ainsworth. Mr. Quarrington's car went through the barrier and fell into the sea below the bridge. I'm terribly sorry, but even if he survived the crash, the chances of surviving the fall into the sea are almost none. We have to suspend the search operation for now." The world seemed to spin around her. Winifred's vision went black, and she fainted on the spot. The scene was cordoned off by the police for further investigation, and the staff advised Winifred Ainsworth to go home and wait for news. Winifred returned to her flat in a daze, the darkness of her home enveloping her in silence. She switched on the lights and looked around. Suddenly, she heard Ewan Quarrington's cheerful voice in her ears. "Winnie, are you feeling down? I'll make you some chamomile tea." She ran frantically to the kitchen, then to the study and bedroom. It was clearly an auditory hallucination. There was no one there. In the empty rooms, only 2 packed suitcases stood by the wardrobe. Why were there suitcases? The wedding was in a few days, and neither Ewan nor she had any travel plans recently. She stared blankly at the suitcases, only then noticing a sticky note and a USB drive on the bedside table. The note was in Ewan's handwriting. "Let's end it here. I wish you happiness." Winifred's hands began to shake violently. What did this mean? She grabbed the USB drive and stumbled to the study, the few seconds it took for the computer to boot up feeling like an eternity. There was only one video file on the drive. She clicked play. Her own image appeared on the screen. It was her in a wedding dress, in a video she had made for Arthur Cartwright. Like a bolt from the blue, Winifred's mind went blank. Ewan knew. When did he find out? In the video, she was still earnestly confessing her true feelings to Arthur. Arthur, I'm getting married. As long as you can be happy, I'm willing to marry someone I don't love. Love isn't about receiving, it's about giving. I'll keep giving silently for you, forever. Winifred trembled all over, unable to watch another second. She couldn't bear to imagine how Ewan must have felt when he saw this. Her image quickly faded, and Ewan appeared on the screen. His eyes were slightly red, his voice bitter. Winifred Ainsworth, this year marks our 5th together. I thought we would be together forever. Perhaps heaven couldn't bear to let me remain in the dark. I accidentally saw your confession video to Arthur. I'm sorry for seeing you in your wedding dress ahead of time, but it's all right. I suppose I'm not the first to see it. I shouldn't have disrupted your plans. The ring you designed, the wedding dress, all the wedding details, they weren't for me, so the groom shouldn't be me either. Back then, when Mavis ran off with Arthur, the double betrayal by my lover and best friend nearly broke me. You helped me through that dark time, even though it was just to support Arthur. Still, I must thank you. Thank you for this long 5-year performance. You don't need to sacrifice your marriage anymore. No matter what, I won't interfere in Arthur's life again. Whether Arthur chooses Mavis or you, it's no longer my concern. I wish you happiness. There's no need to say goodbye. We needn't meet again. Every word struck Winifred like a thunderbolt. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her pupils dilated to their limit, her mind buzzing. So Ewan had been preparing to leave all along. He didn't want her anymore. Winifred Ainsworth shut down her computer and walked to the living room in a daze. She paced back and forth in the living room like a zombie, unaware of her surroundings. After what seemed like an eternity, she finally noticed the scattered pill bottles and a glass of water on the coffee table. Winifred picked up one of the bottles and realized they were all stomach medications. It was only then that she remembered Ewan Corrington's pale face and the beads of sweat on his forehead when they met that afternoon. Had his stomach pain flared up at that time? Why did he have to go out so late at night? Was he heading to the hospital? If she hadn't gone out drinking and had stayed home to keep Ewan company, he wouldn't have had to drive himself to the hospital. Perhaps he could have avoided this tragedy. She had noticed he was unwell at the time. Ewan had a weak stomach and often suffered from bouts of pain. She was all too familiar with the symptoms. But when Ewan suddenly confronted her about her hidden feelings for Arthur Cartwright, she panicked and instinctively chose to run away. Did she really like Arthur that much? The events of the past few years kept replaying in her mind. Back then, when Arthur confided in her that Mavis Church had impulsively run away from their wedding but later regretted it and wanted to go back to beg Ewan for forgiveness, she had hastily confessed her feelings to Ewan, cutting off Mavis's path of return. At that time, she genuinely wanted to help Arthur. She had indeed deceived Ewan. But later, she had unknowingly let go of her feelings for Arthur. When she tried on her wedding dress before the ceremony, she suddenly realized that she hadn't thought about Arthur in a long time. She felt a twinge of regret, as if her purest emotions had faded away. In a strange state of mind, she recorded that confession video. She spoke words of deep affection, immersing herself in the role of a passionate lover she had created. How much of those tears were genuine, and how much was a self-induced lie? That wasn't her true feelings at all. How could she not love Ewan? But Ewan didn't know any of this. He left, filled with disappointment and hatred at being deceived and made a fool of, leaving behind a broken version of herself, without even a chance to make amends. Unable to bear thinking any further, Winifred covered her face and broke down in tears. 2 weeks later, on the other side of the world, I was having breakfast in a sun-drenched living room. After the car accident that day, I was fortunate to have gotten out of the car in time. A chain collision occurred behind me, and my car was knocked over the bridge railing, plunging into the sea. Before the accident, the video sent by Arthur Cartwright had left me feeling disheartened. At that moment, I didn't want to face Winifred Ainsworth anymore. I just wanted to leave her world forever. Before the rescue team arrived, I quietly left and contacted my uncle. My uncle picked me up with his private jet and brought me to America. Ewan, my uncle, wearing a dressing gown, came down the stairs. As he passed by me, he patted my shoulder. "No work today. Your uncle's taking you on a blind date." I nearly spat out my coffee. "You can't be serious, uncle. Is blind dating popular in America too? What happened to your different girl every day plan?" My uncle pointed at me. "You cheeky boy. You're giving your uncle too much credit. Even if I had the ability to date a different girl every day, I'd keep that talent for myself." He poured himself a cup of coffee and said seriously, "Jokes aside, it's not a blind date. I'm taking you to see a doctor. Stomach problems mainly need nurturing. I have a friend from a traditional herbal medicine family. I'll take you to see her." Going to America to see a herbalist seemed a bit odd to me. But my uncle earnestly explained, "They've had a family herbal medicine shop here for many years. If we weren't old friends, you wouldn't be able to get an appointment even if you booked half a month in advance. The locals really trust this stuff. Miraculous Eastern medicine. Instant cure." My uncle praised the doctor as if she were some kind of mystic, so I subconsciously imagined a whimsical old man with a white beard. To my surprise, it turned out to be a whimsical, cool beauty. Her black hair was simply tied back, and above her mask, a pair of cool phoenix eyes were revealed, with deep pupils. She raised her eyes to look at me, and a ripple seemed to appear in those originally calm eyes, as if ice and snow were melting at the bottom. "Mr. Quarrington, nice to meet you. I'm your uncle's friend, Bronte Thornton." I was stunned for a moment before I reacted, quickly extending my hand to place it on the pulse-taking cushion. That's when I realized that Dr. Thornton thought I was reaching out to shake hands and had already extended her own hand halfway. I blushed and quickly moved to shake Dr. Thornton's hand, but almost simultaneously, she lowered her hand to take my pulse. Our arms collided midway, making a crisp sound, and Dr. Thornton's snow-white arm immediately turned red. I was too embarrassed to know how to react, while my uncle, who had been watching the show from the side, couldn't help but burst into laughter. Dr. Thornton and I both turned our heads, and my uncle quickly pretended to cough, clearing his throat. "I have something to attend to. Bronte, give my nephew a thorough checkup, from head to toe. Take a good look." With that, he patted his spotless suit and left gracefully, leaving me with a doctor I had just met. What kind of uncle is this? As I was grumbling inwardly, Dr. Thornton remained calm and collected, getting up to pour me a cup of tea. "We'll check your pulse later. Let's just chat casually for now. Observation, listening, questioning, and pulse-taking. We'll start with the questioning." Dr. Thornton was very thorough in her inquiry, and finally prescribed some herbal medicine for me, along with some home remedies. As I was leaving, I sincerely thanked her. "Thank you for your trouble today, Dr. Thornton." "You're welcome. You can call me Bronte." "Bronte? Isn't that inappropriate? She's my elder's friend, and we've just met. Can I address her so intimately?" I didn't dare to say anything, but Dr. Thornton seemed to know what I was thinking. She took off her mask and smiled gently. "Your uncle is my older cousin's classmate. I'm actually a year younger than you." The person in front of me with that smile was like a blooming hibiscus. I was momentarily dazed, but then wondered, how did she know my age? My phone rang with a message notification. It was from my uncle. "How was it? The blind date your uncle arranged for you? Not bad, right?" Upon returning home, my uncle eagerly inquired about my impression of Bronte. Blushing, I replied, "Dr. Thornton is so accomplished. I doubt she'd be interested in someone like me." My uncle playfully punched my arm. "I'm equally puzzled as to why she's taken a liking to you," he chuckled. "Bronte Thornton is renowned for being an ice queen. She's been dedicated to her medical career since childhood. She's had suitors queuing up from London to Paris, but she's never shown interest in any of them. Then one day, she spotted your video on my phone. She stared at it for ages. When she heard you had a girlfriend, she was visibly disappointed. If you hadn't come to your senses, you might have missed out on such a wonderful girl. I didn't have the courage to immediately dive into a relationship, and Bronte didn't push in that direction either. She simply used the pretext of follow-up appointments to meet me frequently, sometimes even coming to my flat to teach me how to prepare herbal remedies. A few months later, I unexpectedly ran into Alwyn Windsor, who was on a business trip to London. Alwyn was startled, thinking he'd seen a ghost in broad daylight. After a chaotic explanation, Alwyn understood the situation and embraced me, sobbing. "Ewan, I thought I'd never see you again." Alwyn informed me that Winifred hadn't ended up with Arthur. After the accident, Arthur quickly left the company. Before leaving, he had forged Winifred's signature to swindle a modest sum from the company. Winifred had lost interest in managing the business and had been searching for me. The company had lost many clients, and its future looked bleak. Alwyn asked, "Ewan, are you planning to return to England?" I nodded. My rash decision to fake my death and leave was, in hindsight, quite immature. Wanting to punish those who had betrayed me with news of my death was nothing more than a psychological victory, wasn't it? I wasn't the one who had done wrong. I had no reason to hide from anyone. My uncle's company needed someone to expand their business in England, and there was no one more suitable than me. I believed that true closure wasn't about erasing the past, but accepting it. 3 months later, I returned to London as the head of the branch office. Before I left, Bronte arranged to meet me, saying she'd visit me in England when she had the chance. As we said goodbye, she gave me a gentle hug, and on impulse, I placed a soft kiss on her forehead. Bronte looked surprised. I blushed and stammered. "Once the branch office is running smoothly, and I found a suitable person to take over, I'll come back as soon as I can." Bronte smiled and said softly, "I'll be waiting for you." After returning to England, I threw myself into work. Strangely, I didn't encounter many familiar faces from my past. A month later, Bronte came to visit me. I was overjoyed and took 2 days off to show her around. In the evening, as I was escorting Bronte back to her hotel, I heard an enraged voice. "Ewan Quarrington." I turned to look and saw Arthur Cartwright. He strode over, his eyes blazing with fury. "I knew you weren't dead, you sneaky bastard. You made me look like a villain while you faked your death and lived it up." He looked Bronte up and down, sneering. "Weren't you madly in love with Winifred? How quickly you found someone new." Bronte frowned at his words. "Sir, please show some respect to my boyfriend." Arthur looked haggard, a far cry from his once polished appearance. His eyes were filled with agitation and jealousy. He spoke in a shrill tone. "At university, everyone liked you. Classmates, professors, everyone. What makes you so much better than me? Is it just because you come from a better family? How am I inferior to you? I beat you once. Mavis chose me, but she regretted it the very next day. Winifred claimed to love me, but your clever trick of faking your death made her feel guilty about you and drove me out of the company. What can you do besides act like a nice guy? Why do they all end up choosing you in the end?" Looking at his frenzied expression, I finally understood the person before me. We were in the same research group during our postgraduate studies. He came from a poor background and wasn't very popular, so I always looked out for him. In his eyes, however, I was just acting like a nice guy. I had never harbored any ill will towards him, yet he despised me to his core. I coldly regarded this friend I once considered close. "I've never pretended to be a nice guy. I genuinely considered you a friend and never thought you were inferior to me in any way. It's your own dark mindset. You've focused on petty rivalries that aren't worth mentioning, and in the end, you're bound to lose everything." I turned to leave but saw a familiar figure standing nearby. It was Winifred. She had just stepped out of her car and, upon seeing me, her eyes filled with disbelief. She dropped her bag and ran towards me, hugging me tightly. Ewan, it really is you. You're alive. Thank goodness. I pushed her away forcefully. She stumbled back a few steps, only then noticing Arthur's presence. Her face paled instantly, and she spoke urgently. Ewan, I didn't come here with him. Really, I'm not with him. I kicked him out of the company ages ago. I replied coolly, Miss Ainsworth, there's no need to explain anything to me. My girlfriend and I have plans, so we'll be going now. I pulled Bronte Thornton away, intending to leave, but Winifred Ainsworth suddenly lunged from behind and clung to me tightly. Don't go, Ewan. It's not what you think. I know I was wrong, she cried, her tears soaking through my shirt, irritating me inexplicably. I pried her fingers off one by one and turned to face her tear-stained visage. Miss Ainsworth, we broke up long ago. Please have some self-respect. For a moment, pain and regret flashed in her eyes as she shook her head repeatedly. No, I never agreed. We haven't broken up. Losing patience, I coldly said, a breakup doesn't require mutual consent. I have a girlfriend now. Stop bothering me. Winifred looked blankly at Bronte, then turned to me and asked, Ewan, you're just using her to make me jealous, aren't you? Are you punishing me for my mistakes? I don't mind, as long as you forgive me. Her presumption made me laugh bitterly. Suddenly, as if remembering something, Winifred grabbed Arthur Cartwright and pulled him over. Apologize to Ewan right now, she demanded. I looked on in confusion as Arthur kept his head down, lost in thought. Seeing he wouldn't speak, Winifred urgently explained to me, Ewan, that video he sent you that night wasn't real. It was deep-faked. Nothing happened that night. I just had too much to drink and rested in the hotel room for a bit. Growing angrier, Winifred slapped Arthur across the face. Say something. If it weren't for your ill intentions and meddling, Ewan wouldn't have left me in despair. The slap made Arthur's nose bleed, and he nearly lost his balance. Winifred's voice grew shrill. If you don't get Ewan's forgiveness today, I'll report you for forging my signature and embezzling company funds. Do you know how many years you'll serve for that? She kept shoving Arthur, not noticing his gradually manic and vicious expression. Suddenly, Arthur leapt up, producing a switchblade from nowhere and lunging straight at me. I instinctively shielded Bronte, leaving my back exposed to Arthur. In an instant, I felt someone throw themselves onto my back, followed by a scream. I turned around to see the hotel security rushing in to pin Arthur to the ground. The knife was still lodged in Winifred's shoulder. She gave me a pained smile. I'm glad. You're all right? We rushed Winifred to the hospital. The wound wasn't life-threatening, but it was deep and required surgery. Bronte waited with me outside the operating theater. I apologetically said, Bronte, I'm sorry you had to witness all this unpleasantness. My past. She smiled and cut me off. We can talk about that later. I actually know a bit already, but it's not important. After a moment of silence, she said softly, perhaps it's not appropriate to say this now, but I think she truly regrets her actions. As a woman, I can sense that her love for you isn't a lie. If the misunderstanding between you two has been cleared up, would you forgive her? I took her hand and looked at her intently. Bronte, there is no misunderstanding between Winifred and me. What she said about the video doesn't matter at all. I had already decided to leave before that happened. I may be a bit mild-mannered, but once I've made up my mind, I don't change it. If you trust me, will you stand by my side? You don't need to worry about anything else. Bronte chuckled softly, her serene gaze full of trust, calming me down as well. She gave my hand a gentle squeeze and said tenderly, all right, then I'll stand by your side. I won't leave as long as you don't let go. A few hours later, a nurse came to inform us, the patient is awake. You can visit her now. I stood up, pulling Bronte along, but she shook her head. I'll wait for you out here. She straightened my collar, her smile radiant. Don't lose your temper. Talk to her properly. She'll understand. In the hospital room, Winifred Ainsworth's face was pale. When she saw me, Tears quickly welled up in her eyes. I sat down by the bed, took a deep breath, and sincerely said, "Winifred, thank you." She burst into tears instantly. "Ewan, don't thank me. I don't want to hear you thank me. I just want to beg for your forgiveness." I sighed. "Winifred, to be honest, I'm not sure if I've forgiven you or not. But I know that I've let it go. In fact, I can't even remember the last time I thought about you." Winifred sobbed uncontrollably. "Don't say that, Ewan. I'd rather you hate me." I shook my head. "Hating someone is exhausting too. I don't want to be like Arthur, letting hatred consume my life. I did hate you once. At that time, I couldn't understand why I couldn't warm your heart in 5 years. You were willing to sacrifice your own marriage for Arthur's sake. What did I do wrong?" She was stunned by my questions for a moment, then frantically shook her head in denial. "It's not like that. I don't love Arthur. I was just infatuated with him. The first person I liked, always out of reach. I just couldn't let go. At first, I did approach you because of him, but later, I had long forgotten about him. I truly wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. I didn't understand. If she had forgotten about him, why was there still that confession video?" Hearing my confusion, Winifred said regretfully, "That day when I was trying on the wedding dress, I suddenly realized that I hadn't thought about Arthur for a long time. For some reason, I felt a bit of regret, as if the feelings I had held onto for years weren't pure anymore. So I recorded that video, but it was just a form of self-hypnosis and deception. In fact, I had fallen in love with you long ago, Ewan. Please believe me." She also mentioned the mistakes she made after Arthur came back. "Ewan, you were too good to me. It made me think that no matter what I did, you would forgive me. If I could do it all over again, I would never treat you like that." Turns out she also knew her behavior was too much, but she was convinced that love would make me blindly tolerate her. I suddenly felt relieved. She understood everything. She knew everything. She said she only realized how deeply she loved me after losing me. But if it was true love, how could she bear to hurt me? How could she bear to make me suffer? She cried heartbrokenly. I took a tissue from the bedside table and handed it to her. Looking at her red, swollen eyes, I sighed and said softly, "In the past, I would be devastated just seeing you frown. But now, seeing you cry like this, I only feel a bit of pity. When Arthur stabbed me with the knife, I didn't think about anything else. I just wanted to protect my girlfriend. Maybe it's cruel to say this, but when love is gone, it's gone. Winifred, I don't love you anymore." I stood up. "I forgive you. I wish you happiness." I walked out of the hospital room, with muffled sobs coming from behind me. It's not that I didn't feel any sadness at all. It's just that the past is in the past. Saying more wouldn't change anything. Let time give everyone their answers. I strode across the corridor, walking towards the figure waiting for me. A year later, I finished the affairs at the branch office and returned to London. Bronte and I held a grand wedding in London. The scene that day will be unforgettable for the rest of my life. Bronte, arm in arm with her father, walked through the sacred arch, along the long flower path towards me. God, she was so beautiful I forgot to breathe. Her father placed her hand in mine. The music paused, and the whole venue fell silent. After saying our vows and exchanging rings, I cupped her face and kissed her deeply. "I love you, Bronte Thornton. I love you, Ewan Quarrington." A year later, our daughter was born. We held a lively christening for her. While sorting through the gifts, we found an unmarked box containing a delicate christening bangle. Bronte Thornton held up the bangle, puzzled. "This is quite lovely. I wonder why there's no name on it." I took the bangle, a distant memory suddenly flashing through my mind. I quietly put it away. "It's probably not from anyone important. Don't let our daughter play with it. She might put it in her mouth." Our daughter let out a wail, and we both turned, bumping our heads together. We exclaimed in unison, "Are you all right?" It suddenly reminded me of the day we first met. When our arms collided in midair, what an embarrassing moment that was. That scene felt like it was just yesterday. We looked at each other and smiled, embracing tightly. Love, when it comes full circle, always finds its way back to those who truly care for each other.